Okay, here we go. The Uncommon Gift, Chapter 21. Just ordered a brand new front door yesterday with side lights, and the furnace man came today and made us pour. So he'll be out to install a new furnace and AC next week. I gotta go sell some books. So, Tuesday at school was fine and music practice was going very well. And Mr. Taylor was very pleased with the 3 periods of classes. Maybe by the end of the year, the concert was going to be very good this year. He told Bobby he was very impressed how his playing was going and that he was doing better than some of the other clarinet players who had been in class all year. It was all coming back to him fairly quickly, but all of his practicing at home and 2 lessons with Mark Malone at the university every week had a lot to do with it. He was glad to be able to take a break in playing and get back to playing some baseball and get ready for Wednesday's game with Ben Franklin Middle School. They had a good team that was 12-3, so Walden would have to play a great game to come out on top. Bobby was going to play center field as usual, but was moved up in the order to bat third, so it was critical for him to get in some good batting practice today, as he had missed many Monday practices, but Tuesdays through Thursdays are the ones he was doing fine. Left-hander Ben Morgan was going to pitch for Walden, and he had only 1 loss for the year that was 2-1, so the team had confidence going in. He also played first base when not pitching and was a very good hitter as well. Tuesday's baseball practice went well and everybody hit real well, and the infield defense was superb. Everybody hoped that it was that good tomorrow. They also spent time bunting and stealing bases, as probably 1 run was going to be the difference tomorrow. The game was going to be over at the nicer high school field as they were playing an away game, so Walden would ride the bus over to the field. All the players wore their jerseys to school on Wednesday to get the school hyped up about the big game and making the trip over to watch the game at the high school. The principal offered free ice cream to every student who attended the game as an added incentive to go. Many were going to make the trip. Bobby's parents were going to go as well as many others. After school and baseball, Bobby and Diane decided to practice their instruments together and record them at Diane's house. Diane had come to practice and did some homework on the bleachers while Bobby practiced. Bobby stopped at his house and took over his music stand to Diane's, and they got set up and practiced some, and then Diane hit record and they were off. They both sounded very good, but Bobby was getting a little tired of playing the second clarinet part that was becoming way too easy with not many octave changes in the second part. He still was sounding much better and had to remember that he was really only a newbie to the other kids in the band. They listened to the playback and were satisfied with how it sounded and decided that that was enough for today. Diane's mom called upstairs and said that she was about to put out some cookies and milk and for them to come down and have some. She did not have to ask twice. They put up their instruments and Bobby brought down his clarinet and music stand and sat them by the front door, and they both headed into the kitchen as Mrs. Davis had taken the last of the chocolate chip cookies out of the oven and the gallon of milk was on the table with 2 glasses ready to go. Warm cookies were the best. Bobby and Diane had about 4 each and decided that that was enough before supper. Both of their fathers were going to be getting home a little late, so the cookies were not a problem. Bobby thanked Mrs. Davis, and he headed home after saying goodbye to Diane. With the band in common, they were getting to be very good friends. Bobby got home and finished some science homework and read 2 chapters in his history book, and was finished just as Dad walked in the back door. Bill had to inspect 2 buildings the city owned to make sure that they had adequate sprinkler system coverage that the insurance company was comfortable with, and it was all fine and up to code. The city fire chief was there to help. Mom had roasted a larger chicken and was putting it on the table. Bobby was stirring up the mashed potatoes, and Mom had put the chicken gravy in the gravy bowl. The green beans were just about heated up. Mom had set the table, and Bill had gone into the bathroom and washed his hands and was coming to the table. They had a nice supper, and Bobby filled them in on the good practice he had at baseball and again at Diane's house. They talked about how the team would need to have a good game to beat Franklin. Bobby was confident. His parents said that they were going to invite Charles and Cassandra and see if they could come to the game. Now Bobby was beginning to feel some pressure. After supper, Bobby headed upstairs and turned on his stereo to the college station, and someone was interviewing the piano players from the previous Saturday concert, talking about how they got started playing and their previous teachers. One thing common to all of them was their near constant practicing it took to become as good as they were. They all said that between school and music, there was little time for much else if you wanted to do music as a career. Bobby listened for a while and then went and took a shower and got ready for bed. It was only 8:30, but he needed to get some rest for the big game tomorrow. It did not take long and he was fast asleep. In the morning, his mom made him a nice breakfast of scrambled eggs, bacon, OJ, and a small bowl of oatmeal. She also packed him a small bag lunch of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some chips for a snack right after school and before the game. She also included a couple of juice boxes as well. This was not the day to forget any of that. He had his clarinet as well. He was beginning to think, like the pianist on the radio station last night, that if you want to accomplish something in life, free time is pretty limited. The day at school seemed to drag as Bobby was having a hard time not to think about the game after school, but it was great kind of a concert to have two things to really care about, baseball and now his music. He could see that music was going to take over more of his time in high school. But for now in this summer, he wanted to enjoy his baseball life. Band and lunch went pretty fast, and math class was pretty easy as they had a test the previous day and did not really want to start something new. Some review of some harder algebra was in order. The end of the day came and down to the gym went Bobby and his teammates to grab their gear and get to the bus. Bobby would leave his clarinet locked up in Mr. Taylor's room today and take a night off of practice, and that was okay. They arrived at the high school field, and it was nice to be playing on a full grass infield and actual covered dugouts. There were enough stands to seat about 500, but most fans brought their own chairs with seat backs that were much more comfortable. On both baselines, the city had put up mounds so the fans that could sit on them tapered on flat spots about 6 feet up off the ground, tapered again and another 6 feet higher, and another rise and then a flat top so the fans could see over one another. It made it tougher for the city people to cut the grass, but they did just fine, and they did it with self-propelled walking mowers anyway. The Booster Club was getting the concession stand ready with candy, drinks, hamburgers, and hot dogs, cheese, nachos, popcorn, cotton candy, and the like. It was a big money maker for the high school. There was also a small playground further back for the little kids, and it had a chain link fence all around and over the top to keep foul balls from hurting the kids. Bobby and Ben Morgan went into the outfield and did some easy running and stretching exercises before beginning to throw. Once their catcher, Mike Mosier, was ready, he and Ben went over to the side and started getting loose. One of the fathers came over and started hitting fly balls to the outfielders, each taking a turn. The Walden infielders were getting loose, but let the Franklin team take infield practice first. The head coaches were talking behind home plate with the umpires and exchanging lineup cards. The two coaches were longtime friends, having both graduated from Illinois State together and played baseball together. The players continued to warm up. Walden took their turns on the infield, and the coaches called in their players into the dugouts, and the game was on. The Walden players ran onto the field to the applause of their fans. Ben Morgan took his warm-up tosses, Mosier threw the ball down to second, and the game started. Ben Morgan was on today, as he only threw strikes in the first. The first two hitters struck out on 3 pitches each, and the number 3 hitter hit a weak ground ball back to Ben, and he threw to first for the third out, and the crowd erupted. Walden's turn in the bottom of the first was wild. Leadoff man Jamie Jones hit a double on the first pitch and stole third on the second one. Number 2 hitter Mark James walked on 4 pitches, and now Walden had runners on first and third, no outs, and Bobby was coming to the plate. His coach placed a finger to his eye, meaning to take a strike. The Franklin pitcher went 2-0 to Bobby, and then threw a strike one right on the outer edge. Bobby was ready on the next one, and was a mistake right down the middle, and Bobby pulled a liner over the third baseman's head, down into the left field corner fence for a double, and both runners scored. Walden 2, Franklin nothing. Walden scored 3 more on a walk to Jesus Alvarez, and then Ben Morgan hit the first pitch he saw way over the left field fence for a 3-run homer and a 5-0 lead. The Walden fans could not believe what they saw and were going wild. The Franklin pitcher Dave Brubaker calmed down after a meeting on the mound with their coach, and the 3 infield grounders ended the inning still 5-0. Ben Morgan was untouchable and was a strike-throwing machine all day. Everyone was quiet in the dugout, as Franklin had no hits and no base runners after the 4th inning, and the lead was still 5-0 Walden. Morgan had only thrown 31 pitches all game so far. Bobby led off the bottom of the 5th with his second double, but was left stranded at the end of the 5th. This game was all about Ben Morgan. Ben started his 5th inning with a strikeout on 3 pitches. 2 more resulted in pop-ups to first, and the next batter hit a lazy fly ball to Bobby in center. 6 more pitches and 3 more outs, and no hits for Franklin. John Mize and Butch Arnold hit consecutive doubles in the bottom of the 6th inning for 1 more run. It was 6-0. The top of the 6th was just more of the same for Ben Morgan. Strike after strike after strike. 2 foul balls and 3 more Ks on 11 pitches. Bobby's coach said he had never seen anything like this performance from Ben Morgan. With it 6-0, Coach did not want Ben sitting in the dugout while the team scored more runs, so he told the first 3 hitters to be aggressive and put the ball in play, which they did on 6 pitches and 3 outs, so Ben could get back out there and finish Franklin off. The first batter in the top of the 7th and the last inning hit the first pitch a country mile, and Bobby had to get on his horse and caught up to it in center field fence for the first out. He played just 2 steps closer in the infield so as not to let some cheap single ruin Ben's performance. The crowd let out a collective grasp as Bobby ran as fast as he could but pulled it in at the fence. The second batter in the 7th swung and missed the first 2 pitches and then hit 3 straight foul balls back to the screen. Ben threw a curveball to his left, which broke into the dirt and bounced in front of home plate. The batter swung over the top of it. Mark Mosier blocked it and threw to first for the second out. The crowd was really going crazy. The infield threw the ball around and back to Ben it went. He just stood behind the rubber on the mound and stared into home plate. He wasn't even looking at the batter, just focusing in on Mark Mosher's glove. The Franklin batter didn't seem worried, but he had to be as he was about to wear the final out of a perfect game. Ben threw two more curveballs that started on the outside corner and ended up in the left-handed batter's box, but the batter swung and missed both by 2 feet. The count was 0-2, and now everyone was on their feet chanting, "Morgan, Morgan, Morgan." Ben towed the rubber and got his sign from Mosher. He rocked back and fired a fastball on the inside black of home plate. The hitter jumped back, but it was a strike all the way, and the umpire called it, and the place went wild. "Strike 3," yelled the umpire, pumping his right hand with the third strike. The perfect game was over. Ben Morgan threw 51 pitches in 7 innings. It was an amazing performance, and the entire team mobbed him at the mound, jumping up and down, and the fans were beside themselves with joy. Bobby finally looked over and saw his parents, who were applauding, but he then noticed that Charles and Cassandra Miller were sitting right next to them with Diane, and they were all hugging each other, so happy for the team. The two coaches met at home plate and shook hands, and the Franklin coach came over and shook hands with Ben Morgan, which was a very nice gesture. The teams lined up and gave each other high fives on a well-played game. The field was still buzzing with excitement, and they were playing music over the PA system, and some of the fans were dancing all over the grass, enjoying it as one might never see a performance like this again. The boys all grabbed their gear and headed out, off the field, and Diane came up to Bobby and, totally unexpected, threw her arms around his neck and gave him the biggest hug ever. She then kissed him on his cheek, which really wasn't expected, but enjoyed nonetheless. She even surprised herself. "Oh, Bobby, what a game you played tonight," she said, just letting go of his neck. I hope I'm not embarrassing you," she asked. "Surprised, yes, but embarrassed, no," he said, and he gave her a hug of his own. Once the hugging was over, they walked toward the bus holding hands. Bobby saw the Millers and waved to them, and they waved back. Bobby's parents said they would meet him over at the school when they got back, and headed to their cars along with the Millers. Charles had invited everyone to dinner after the game, including Diane and her parents. Bill and Mary said they would go over to the Davis house and pick them up and see if they would go, and they did agree. Charles had made reservations at Smith's Steakhouse on Elm and said they would meet everyone there. This was going to be nice, as the Millers had wanted to meet Diane's parents, and the Masons had been wanting to get to know the Davis family better, especially now as it seemed that Diane and Bobby were getting friendlier by the minute and had much in common. It really wasn't that much of a surprise when one really thought about it. They all had a great time at dinner and getting to know each other better. Charles was wondering just how good of a ball player Bobby really was. Just not better than the clarinetist he would become, and that was the point of it all, really. They said their goodbyes, and Diane rode in the car with Bobby going home. Diane's parents were fine with that. Young love, except no substitute.